In my room, I had like little postcards on the wall and said like, I want to be on the U.S. Women's National Team, right? Like all of the posters of everybody you could think of, B2K, if people know who that is, a Bow Wow poster, you know, I was in my 12-year-old world.
What's up, guys? I am so excited about this week's new guest. She is awesome, so I can't wait for you to hear our conversation. I'll try to make this intro short, but it's tough because she has a really impressive background and story. We've got Marsha Harper on this week, the brand new American University women's soccer head coach. And although she has had this job for almost a year now, she has yet to coach a single game, of course, due to the pandemic. We talk about how Marsha is making history now as just the fourth Black female head coach in all of women's Division I soccer. That's over 300 programs. So she shares about the significance that she feels in this role and how important representation is, and also all the amazing initiatives that her team is getting involved in terms of social justice issues and mental health among athletes. So we touch on all of this and more. I'm excited for you to hear part one here, where we talk about Marsha's growing up and what it was like to be raised by two parents in the military. She also shares about her recruiting process as a player. She went on to play Division I soccer at Florida and USF, so she transferred. We talk about that too. We talk about it a lot. But lastly, we finish up this part one talking about her inspiration to becoming a coach and how she never actually saw that as a career path for her. So I love all of her perspectives on life and sports and soccer and all that good stuff. So I'm going to stop talking now so we can get to our conversation. Here is Marsha.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you got the job with AU at the end of December of 2019. I'm sure you're all excited, new head coaching gig, and then a few months into it, COVID hit. So we can't skip over the fact that you started your brand new head coaching job basically during a pandemic. So what has that looked like for you?
Yeah. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think it was announced, that I got the job like December 29th or something like that.
Yeah.
And then actually my first day on campus was like January 6th, went recruiting, came back. And so I had roughly two and a half months with the team in person before they went on spring break and then never came back because of COVID, right? So that was unique. I will certainly say even within the 2-month period that I had with them, I feel like we were already like working together for several years. So that was pretty awesome.
Wow.
I've been super lucky to inherit the team that I did and just the women that I did. Don't mean to be cheesy, but it's true, right? They certainly have given me gray hairs, but I
you hide it well. I can't see it.
Thank you. And it's a lighting. I think we're all kind of, for every human on the planet, it was an unprecedented thing. And it's kind of like, this is what it is, right? There was that period that we were all as humans just kind of trying to navigate the toilet paper situation, right? Like,
hand sanitizer's gone forever.
Yeah. So that put a lot of things into perspective. Certainly, obviously we all miss soccer and like being around one another, but it was also like, this is a life or death thing. And so I think that was really kind of like a sobering thing for a lot of people. And I think it came, there was like an emotion of a roller coaster of emotions rather.
Yeah.
There's certainly times when I could tell that they were just like bummed or like, this is even hard, like being on Zoom and like being away from my teammates. All I want to do is like be, around these people and I have to just see them on camera. I will say it certainly has not been anything that I had even planned on at all.
It'd be a weird backup plan to have if you did. You're like, I was prepared for this.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's, you try to take things from everything that's thrown at you, especially when we weren't able to be in person yet. We learned a lot about one another. We're already very close prior to myself and our assistant on staff, Katie, being here. And the fact that they opened up and allowed us to kind of come into their family, as cheesy as that sounds, I think has really strengthened who we are as a program and where we're headed. And because of that, we were able to have, although it was virtually, we were able to have some really like deep, intense talks.
And those might have been conversations that you might have never been able to get to that point.
Right.
If you're just like, all right, here we go, soccer time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool that they already got to establish that relationship with you, because not a lot of programs get that time. And then
Right.
someone like you coming in that's so important to you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right now you can still say you're undefeated, right?
Yeah. People keep joking with me about that. I'm like, you're right, but I feel like you have to play a game maybe for that to be the
There to
case.
be a
But
chance.
yeah, no,
That's
I'll
funny.
definitely take it.
Yeah, well, I know, like longest stint of undefeatedness for the program, I'm sure. But so I mean, there's so much I want to talk with you about, and I want to, touch on your path to becoming a head coach, your background as a player. But the kind of the point of this podcast is talking about, major life changes and thinking our life is going to go one way, and then all of a sudden, like, life throws some shit at us and it goes another way. But
Yeah.
with that being said, I want to go all the way back and ask you, if I'm asking 12-year-old Marsha, what do you want to be when you grow up? What was in your head at that point?
Yeah, well, I for sure probably was like every other, I guess, 12-year-old, right? In my room, I had like little postcards on the wall and said like, I want to be on the U.S. Women's National Team, right? Like all of the posters of everybody you could think of. At that time, I think B2K, if people know who that is, was popular, right? Like I had the K poster, a Bow Wow poster, I was in my 12-year-old world.
Yes.
But I think in terms of what I thought my future was going to be like, I certainly think soccer was a part of it, but I don't know if I really knew the impact that soccer would have on my life. And I knew that it was a sport that I enjoyed and a sport that I was relatively good at, right, at the time. But even then I was just starting competitive soccer. So it was, so it wasn't like end all be all.
How old were you when you started to play?
Yeah, so I started to play, I think when I was 4, for the City Park Sunflowers.
Heard good things.
Yeah. It was, the good old recreation club of Denver.
It's intimidating.
Yeah, that was back when I, was toe poking the ball, which didn't end probably until high school, maybe college. But
it's a tough habit to break.
Yeah, I think soccer was in my life, obviously, but I didn't think that it was probably as strong or prominent as it is now, of course. But I think 12-year-old Marsha was thinking about who knows what, but certainly like just excited to wake up every morning. That's the way that I was raised, right? Yeah. It's kind of like, all right, this is a new day. Like, again, I'm a very cheesy person, right?
Like, bring it on.
But that was how I was raised. It was like, you can wake up and decide to be sleep on the wrong side of the bed, or you can wake up and just attack the day, and that choice is yours. Yeah. I think that's as much as I can remember probably about 12-year-old Marsha.
I was like, at that point, I was thinking I was going to be an astronaut. Boy, did the tables turn there. Yeah.
Well, sky's the limit, right?
Yeah, I think I've skipped a few math classes to pursue that. I think probably not on the best path. But yeah, so you talk about, growing up. What I'm really interested about your background, something that I can relate to, is you grew up in a military family. What was it like being raised by your mom, serving in the military? What sort of things, did you learn from her directly that she taught to you, and then just from watching her?
Yeah. So my dad was also in the service. Both were Army, but my dad was retired at that point. My mom ended up retiring several years later as lieutenant colonel. But she is, where are the words, right? Even if she wasn't in the military, I think that she would still be kind of who she is, right? She grew up to a less fortunate family in Georgia back in the day. She's the oldest and the only girl, right? So she already kind of had that, I'm the boss.
Yeah.
She's very much a leader and lead by example, lead with compassion, but she certainly has high standards. And I think that the military absolutely probably helped shape her in that way. She's a no-nonsense woman. Like, it's not even, some kids like try and like poke the bear with their parents and like push the lines and test the waters. Like that was never a thing for me and my brother. It was like, she doesn't have to say anything. It was just like, nope, don't ask. Don't even expect anything. Don't do that. Definitely don't do that. You know what I mean? So,
she taught you early on, just like, here's the deal.
Yeah. And, I would say because of that and in her background, and especially where she came from, there was very there wasn't any room for just like feeling bad about yourself, or like regardless of what the circumstance is around you or where you're coming from or whatever is against you, like find a way.
Yeah.
And I think that that's her, you know, where she grew up, but also certainly that's the mentality of, you know, the military. Observing that's certainly something that I picked up on.
Yeah, no, I mean, just there's so many things that you realize later on that you learned from being surrounded by that community, even if you weren't directly in it. I know as a military kid, you know, you just grow up around that family and you feel so grateful to have those role models, whether it is your parents or it's your parents' co-pilots or all the people that they served with. So that's something that I didn't realize at the time, but it was cool to hear the stories of them and them out, you know, saving lives. And you're just like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I'm over here picking my nose and eating Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, I think about that now. I'm like, oh, I'm putting down cones and kicking soccer balls for a living. But one thing that I loved as a little kid, probably 12-year-old Marsha.
Okay.
You know, like going onto the base with my mom.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And
coolest thing.
Yeah, like rolling up to the gate and they had to show their ID. And because she was a higher rank than them, they had to like stand back and salute her. I loved seeing that moment. I loved it. And there was one time with this guy, he saw her, you know, read it and then just like handed it back and was like, go ahead, and didn't do it. And I'm like, Mom, he didn't salute you. And she's like, Marsha, go on, right? Like she was just like, relax. But I'm like, no, he has to salute you, right? Like, but I guess 12-year-old Marsha, right? Like I really started to see, okay, this is a woman in power. Like this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
She's a BA, right? Like all these things. And I'm like, yes. And that's in my blood.
Yeah.
You know? And so, I guess that was maybe one of the first, I guess, anecdotes that I had of that kind of moment, and seeing, you know, that women could be the boss and they could be well respected, should be.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite things. And
that's cool. Yeah.
I distinctly remember that moment that he did not do it. And I'm like, let's turn around.
Go back. Yeah. Know his place. No, that's a really cool story too. And just that you started to see that at a young age and you clearly had that role model and that vision to work towards. And I don't know if that's something that you still kind of harness. Yeah. As you, what are words? I don't know. It's pandemic. But that's cool. And I know something that my dad talked about too, which I think definitely applies to sports, is like anyone that he was ever out on a mission with, like that was his teammate. And granted, they were doing life-threatening things, and he's like, we bonded because like we nearly died together. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not doing that with my teammates, but I get that you're kind of bonding because you're doing tough stuff together, and that's what makes you closer. Is like not winning all these games, but like the tough fitness tests, and you see your teammates struggling, and like those sorts of things. I was the teammate
struggling, by the way.
Same, I feel it. yeah, exactly. So, you know, those sorts of things transferred from, you know, seeing that stuff in the military, and I think that like kind of flows into sports. I don't know if you felt that way too, just kind of seeing that community and how it kind of relates to, you know, athletes as well.
Yeah. So the thing about my mom is she doesn't really like to talk a whole lot about herself.
Oh my God, right? My dad. So, yep. It's a military thing. Yep.
Yeah. So I just tried to observe what I could, but I certainly think as it relates to sports, like that bond that you have with people, especially in a team sport, right? Like where you are in most times quite literally relying on someone else for your success, for your mutual success, right?
Absolutely.
And certainly remember those fitness tests in college, right? Where it's like,
I'm getting nauseous.
Right, we knew that we all had to make the sprint in 18 seconds or else we're just going to keep running. And it's like, okay. And even then I'm like, I'm the one that they're trying to like push across the line. I'm like, Marsha, everyone's relying on me. You got to go. Right. Yeah. Now there was definitely some times I didn't do that and all those things, but but I think sports in similar to certainly the leadership style, a lot of sports, almost every team that you've ever heard of, read about, has tried to practice some military practice, right? Or implement that. You know, we're starting to see, well, now, and certainly I'm sure in the future we still will, people have like SEALs come in and do like workouts with their team and like it's bonding and like getting through a tough, right? So I think there's a lot that our service members have done that have dramatically affected sports in everyone, whether it's directly or indirectly, you know? So yeah. Teammates are the best mates, they say.
Oh yes. I miss it every day. I'm like, hey guys, what are you doing? They're like, Megan, it's been 3 years. We cannot go kick a soccer ball around. I'm like, please. I miss it all the time. Now going back to you being a player though, I want to talk about the moment growing up when you started to really see soccer as something very serious in your life that you wanted to pursue into college, making that decision to play D1, which is, a tough decision. You know that you are committing basically your life for, all day, every day. But at what point did you feel like, okay, this is what I want to do?
I don't know if I've had an aha moment to know that, I guess from a young age, I always just assumed that, I wanted to play sports. I guess maybe when I started to like score goals and, get recognition, that was like, okay, maybe I can do this thing, right? Like maybe I can play this in college. Mm-hmm. I grew up, like I was talking about City Park Sunflowers with the recreational league in Denver. I grew up playing for essentially a rec team all the way through until my sophomore year of high school.
Wow.
So because of that, we all know how, club soccer works now, and the kids are traveling like just across the pond sometimes. Literally. Right? Within
my 7-year-old cousin was in Spain like before the pandemic.
Because that team that I was on, we only traveled to other tournaments within Colorado itself or the surrounding state. So I never, really went, West Coast, East, certainly not East Coast, right? Like I never had that experience that some of my counterparts did. I guess I just realized even within that little bubble in that moment, like, all right, I think I could do this. I'm getting some recognition. Maybe I could play it, like CU or DU, or Denver University, right? And it wasn't until, I love telling this story. This guy, right? I was walking across, it was literally, I think it was sophomore, or like the beginning of sophomore year. Everything happened for me my sophomore year.
Big year.
Yeah. So no, it must've been freshman year. Sorry. Freshman year.
Also big year.
Yes. Right. Walking across a field with my friend, and we were at the boys state cup tournament. Right. That was like the big thing. Right.
Oh yeah.
So
state
I was
cup.
walking across the field, it was halftime, and me and my friend, all of a sudden I hear, hey, and we're like, this Jamaican guy is like, hey, and like waving us over. And we're like, us? He's like, yeah. What? And we walk over, and typically like, don't do this, right? And today's rules, like, don't do that.
Yeah. Disclaimer.
But we walked over, and this guy was like, do you want to come and guest play with my club team in the Houston shootout in like a couple weeks? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I guess I should ask my mom, right? That guy turned out to be Lauren Donaldson, who is he runs the club Real Colorado, which is one of like top clubs, competitive clubs. And I'm like, yeah, my mom let me go. I went with their B team, so their second team, to this tournament in Houston. And at my first game, Becky Burley, who is my college coach at Florida, came. So there's a reason. I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. There's a reason why Lauren saw me walking across the field and was like, hey, right? There's a reason why I was there, specifically that time, that place, and he saw me. And then certainly he clearly made a phone call for Becky to come to this game, because she would not otherwise be going to a second team game, right, at the Houston shootout. So from that tournament, that I came back home and I chatted with Becky. That was my first calls with the college coach.
Oh, wow.
We hit it off.
So you were connected with Becky late in your freshman year, and then you got onto this travel team where you're getting a lot of exposure, but you always kind of kept in contact with Florida. But were you talking to any other schools, or were you like, all right, like Florida's where I want to go?
No, it was so new to me. So I started getting more exposure, but the way that Becky connected with me, most coaches were like, I loved how you played, and they were just talking about soccer. Mm-hmm. She said, like, I think you're a great player, but she spent more time asking about me as a person, like my family, oh, you have an older brother, what do you guys do? Like, just, I could tell that she was different than all the other coaches that were recruiting me at that point. And so, it was kind of, I think I didn't commit until the end of my junior year, which is very late. Yeah. Well, relatively late.
No,
but yeah, she, there's a reason why she was one of the first, right? Yeah. In kind of my process, but no, very lucky, I think, that everything kind of happened the way that it did for me.
Yeah. Wow. I agree. I think everything does happen for a reason. I don't have to go into my recruiting story, but it's kind of similar where like I was at an ID camp for a school I wanted to go to. But then one of the AU assistant coaches was one of the like assistants at this camp at a different school. And she's like, why don't we stay in touch? I was like, what's American? I like literally had never heard of the school. You know, it's all also about keeping an open mind too, because I had like a one-track mind. Like, I want to go to a big state school with a football team. And then I kind of had to have that open mind of like, okay, Americans over here showing interest. I'm not that interested, but like, why don't I learn a little bit more about it, stay in contact with the coaches and everything. But yeah, having that open mind and just like kind of trusting the process. But I love hearing about Becky. I had the amazing opportunity to talk to her at my old job. But so you went on to commit to play at UF at Florida for Becky Burley, who is just an icon in and out of the soccer world. But for anyone who has not heard about Becky or know anything about her, how would you describe her?
Very interesting. I think certainly now that I share the same profession with her, I admire her more probably now than I did as a player.
Yeah,
right?
interesting.
Like, I think most players would probably say that. She was kind of like the glue that held everyone together. You know, you knew that she was the enforcer, you knew that she was the boss, you definitely didn't cross her, but you also knew that she just like genuinely cared about you as a human. I would describe her as uniquely different than any other coach that I've had. And I think very intelligent in how she connects with people and connects people. Yeah. She's very much a people person, and obviously very successful at what she does. I think her ability to connect with people and lead people, if you can connect and communicate a vision, you can get people to run through a wall for you, let alone play soccer, right? Yeah. So I think she was able to do that, and the culture that she created on our team, it kind of led itself, especially on the soccer field in that way. We did well on the field, but we just had it was just a really cool vibe, a really cool feeling to be a part of the program. Yeah.
She just, I've heard, and I was able to witness it, but just of how much she just instills developing players as people, preparing them for after the sport, it's going to end at some point. She recognizes that. And I think that is so important. And, you know, it's something I wish I would have had as a player. And, you know, it's really cool to see mentors like that in sports because they recognize what sports can do for you in your afterlife of sports.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much that has affected you. I wanted to talk about this later on, but I think this is a better segue here, is just like how much her mentorship and leadership has influenced how you are as a coach.
So I'm jumping ships a little bit here, but it's for a good reason. So I played 3 years at Florida, and then I transferred to USF as well, right? So I also played for a woman named Denise Schulte Brown at USF, South Florida. The two of them are like very different humans, but I went to the schools ultimately that I did because of those women. And they are both awesome. Like, they both share, although they're very different, they both share the same passion about developing women, right? And they do it in different ways. I think that's really awesome to see, especially a woman in power who's trying to promote and encourage other women to get there, right? Where a lot of times, unfortunately, as women, we're like, oh, I'm pretty good at this, but like, I don't want to like shout it from the rooftops and tell people that I am.
You don't want to look bossy or like cocky and
Right. Whereas, unfortunately, because society, right, there's this like societal like pressure and image of like, okay, you could be like a woman at the top, but like, just like be quiet about it. Right.
Yeah.
Whereas our male counterparts are like, yeah, I'm great. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
To no fault of their own, it's like, I think that we should all be able to do that. Right.
Exactly.
Like, you are very, very confident in yourself and you know that you can walk the walk. Let people know. Right.
Yes.
A lot of people ask me like, why get into coaching? I think that ultimately I'm in coaching because I enjoy people, and I've been so blessed to have the women in my life, starting from my mom to Becky, Denise, to a handful of other women. It takes a village, right? They say. But those three in particular who have, I don't know, they've done so much for me and like pushed me certainly, and still do. All three of them still do, and challenged me to think, you know, what's my future look like? How can you help this person? How can you bring these people along? Like, helping me push the lid, so to speak. Yeah, I think I got into coaching because I kind of feel like it's my duty now to give back, because I was blessed in so many ways by the people around me that it's like, well, you have to give back.
Yeah.
Right?
And all these great tools.
Yeah, you just hope that you can do half as good as they did.
I can't reiterate enough how important that is for a player. They might not even realize it at the time, but your players, Becky's players, and all of your past coaches and mentors players will look back and be so thankful for the lessons that, you instilled in them. And it wasn't just soccer, soccer, soccer all day long, because it's like those lessons that are way more important later in life. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to part 1 of my conversation with Marsha. Now head on over to part 2, where she shares all about her recruitment process as a player. She shares some crazy injury stories and some very interesting remedies that they did to heal these injuries. So head on over to part 2.